Okay, we're here today with Guido Wimmers of the University of Northern British Columbia and a founding director of the Canadian Passive House Institute, as well as Peter Moonen and Sukh Johal from the Canadian Wood Council. So Peter, maybe start with you. Thanks for coming. Without wanting to sound like immigration officers, what's the purpose of your visit here?
Well, thanks for actually having us, Jeff. The purpose here is information and knowledge sharing. In Canada, we have a burgeoning wood culture and moving towards the awareness of passive design and high-performance buildings. And we know that that's quite prominent in Europe. And we've come over here to explore opportunities to learn, to teach our builders and our architects and our engineers with what's happening in Europe, and to perhaps share what we have learned in tall wood buildings and in high-performance design and the use of some innovative wood products.
Great. Any particular events planned for your itinerary here? Or?
Well, we have met with several educational institutions from around Ireland. We're going to be visiting a training center in Athboy at Ecological Building Systems, because we think that's a model that we might like to explore, and can it be brought to Canada as a way to teach the trades so that they understand how to implement many of the great designs that are coming out.
Okay. Would you say, do you see opportunities for Canadian companies, sort of in the sustainable building space in the Irish market?
Well, the beautiful thing about design and passive house and sustainable design is that knowledge knows no boundaries. So experts from Ireland can benefit Canadian practices. Experts from Canada can help in Austria. Finnish designers can work in the UK, because what we're really trying to do is advance the ability of buildings to do more and impact less.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, because one of the mistakes we made in our last construction boom in Ireland was that we saw it was an entirely domestic boom, and if we had the ability maybe to export, to develop those kinds of trade links, and for Irish companies to gain a foothold in other markets, to export into Canada, for instance, that would be really interesting. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, yes, and not only with Passive House, I think trade between nations should always be encouraged. And I think there are many opportunities in Canada, but also realize that it is a large and vast country. 10 provinces, 3 territories. So every province will be regional with regional differences, but I truly believe there is opportunity in Canada.
Guido, 2 of our local authorities, Dunleary Rathdown and Dublin City Council, have just put forward proposals to make the Passive House standard or equivalent mandatory for new buildings. I don't know what you think of that kind of initiative.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I think that's, generally speaking, a step in the right direction, no question. It depends a little bit on how far the construction industry is already advanced, how far is the gap between common practice and then passive house. So if that gap is not too large, then I think it's quite a good move to do. I'm not entirely sure how big that gap is. If that gap is fairly large, then it's a little bit a risky step to take. So, I've worked and lived for quite a few years in Germany and Austria and now in Canada, and I've seen very different markets, so with very different approach and different building cultures. From my perspective, it needs some time. So on the one hand side, we want to move forward as fast as we can. On the other end, we have to make sure that we still maintain decent quality, and just pushing forward for passive house or even beyond is a risky game if you can't really assure the quality.
Yeah, well, there is that issue. Our building regulations have progressed theoretically very far, to the extent, in fact, that you can argue that there's no extra cost, believe it or not, no extra construction cost in achieving passive house compared to national building regulations. The issue of actually ensuring that the buildings are built properly is another matter entirely,
Vancouver has a very similar situation. They haven't really declared passive house as a building standard yet, but they are starting to promote it quite aggressively. So it's just a matter of time. It might take another 2-3 years or so up to the point when they actually start to also, as a mandatory standard, to push for it.
But I think there's a key element there, that there's a lot of balls you have to juggle in order to be able to achieve your aspirations. You have to have the architects, the engineers, the code officials, the fire protection officials, the building policy and regulators, and you have to have the tradespeople, and you have to have an understanding clientele who says, yes, this is the way I want to go, because I understand the benefits, not just to my lower energy bills or my better air quality, but also that there's an environmental benefit that benefits people beyond me. So you have to have all of those professions elevating their skills and their desire to really make a policy like Passive House policy successful. And so I wish you luck on that. It would be very exciting if it happens.
Well, we're quick learners. There have been a few areas in our past in the construction industry where we've adapted quickly. And, there are varying standards of work which have quality out there in the market at present, but there's some excellent stuff happening. So that big task of meeting the standard. Do you have a sense that if Ireland became seen as a sort of a hub of expertise, if Dublin, for instance, as a region became a Passive House kind of capital, can you see that opening up opportunities for designers and suppliers and sort of tradespeople, into Canada and for more trade links?
Absolutely. I think absolutely that's a big chance, because one of the beauties about the Passive House standard is that this is really truly an international, global standard. So it doesn't matter if your project is in New Zealand or in Japan or China or wherever it is. We're all talking about the same threshold, the same levels, the same performance, and automatically that means also the same kind of quality level of the components and the same skill set of the designers. That varies a little bit depending on the climate zone you're building in, but basically speaking, the knowledge, etc., that's all the same. So if you're becoming one of the leaders in this market, then that is very beneficial across the globe, basically, not just Canada, way beyond as well.
Absolutely. What would you say is the extent, Peter, of the Passive House or just the broader even sustainable building market in Canada?
Well, it varies across the country. We're all from British Columbia, and the Canada Green Building Council was initially part of the U.S. Green Building Council and started in Vancouver, the chapter on the West Coast. It's still an international chapter. So the awareness, the ability, and the drive for high performance buildings really started in the West, but it's now pretty well entrenched across the country. And there's different tools and standards and goals that they have. But I think more importantly, we're seeing it in building code regulations that are changing to reflect, one, capabilities of designers and equipment, two, aspirations of homeowners and building regulators, and all because I think they either want to save money or they want to reduce impact. And I'd like to think it is the latter, but the reality is that if we have lower costs for operating, we can build, put that money somewhere else. And I think that it's a combination. So it's really grown over the last 15 years since I've been involved, and it will grow some more.
Sukh, there's a perception in Ireland that still abounds, a sort of negative perception that building, that timber has limitations from a construction point of view, and that we can't really go beyond sort of 2 or 3 stories, and that that there are performance disadvantages. Traditional views within the construction sector. What would you say to the industry in that regard?
I would tell them to come over to North America, not only Canada, but even the United States of America. Multifamily tall buildings have been around for 20, 30 years now. A standard construction is 6 stories, where you have 5 stories of residential units over 1-story concrete, and in that first level is mercantile operations or live work units. All I can say is that you have to see it to believe it. But these are very large buildings. And built to code, if not surpassing code, and really demonstrates what you can do with wood these days.
I mean, I presume you're monitoring the buildings properly then, where these buildings are being monitored to demonstrate just how well they are performing, in terms of not just energy, but in terms of, I guess hydrothermal performance, moisture movement through the structure and so on, all these kinds of issues.
Well, as always, when you have these buildings, there are certain certain universities that want to conduct research programs and always are looking for these buildings for for test cases and even for general information, so general dissemination of information to the global building community. So they are monitored, yes.
The other thing which I think is really valuable to point out is that the wood sector, while we may compete on particular products and stuff, A company likes to sell their product over B company, collectively, the information that we glean from the work that Sukh is doing on multifamily is shared across the country. The information on tall wood is shared, and in fact, the building that Guido works at in Prince George, the tallest wood building in North America, the design is all open source, so anybody can use that. It's not proprietary, because it's important that we share our capabilities to advance everybody because of the benefits of that. It's not sort of, I've got this, I'm gonna keep this to myself. It's quite collaborative, quite open, and it's a friendly, collaborative competition.
What application do you see for timber in Ireland?
I think globally there is a housing crisis, and I do think that a serious look needs. I think a serious investigation or a look into these taller wood structures needs to happen. These mid-rise buildings, they blend in well into existing neighborhoods, especially when you incorporate commercial operations or mercantile operations on the first floor. It just helps to revive old neighborhoods. We've had tremendous success in Western Canada, where we prior to these buildings, everybody would be driving out to the local mall, and now you're seeing just tremendous community. We're seeing communities growing all over the place, right? It's basically live, work in the same place, and yeah.
I think overall the potential is quite similar to what we've seen in British Columbia, specifically in the Lower Mainland around Vancouver, because climate is fairly similar to the climate here in Ireland. So there's a huge potential, to replace with wooden structures with solid woods and solid timber structures, to get at least a little bit rid of some other building materials with a far higher sustainable impact.
Well, that's interesting, and obviously, I'm guessing from the Wood Council's point of view, and maybe from yours too, Guido, you'd like to see a broadening out of the picture to look at the overall life cycle of buildings, and their components, which we haven't really got there yet.
Yeah, but I think that is coming. There are now tools. There's international standards on life cycle analysis, and to be fair, no building is just one material. But I think what's important is that architects, engineers, designers, if they have a really good understanding of the traditional materials, stone, brick, masonry, wood, steel, concrete, and they understand how they can interact, we'll have better buildings. We'll have buildings that are stronger, lighter, faster, cheaper, lower impact, and higher performing. I think that's the objective. That's where we're trying to go, with the intent of reducing impact, improving performance, better costing, and lower neighborhood disruption for construction.
And well-being.
And well-being.
Quite important, because typically, it doesn't matter if it's passive house or wooden structures, the interior climate typically is just a bit more comfortable, thermally comfortable, easier in terms of moisture content of the air to balance the building, etc. Mm-hmm. So it's about well-being.
But I suppose the point is, you can build a good building out of anything and a bad building out of anything.
Exactly.
In Ireland, we did have some uptake of timber frame during the boom. The developers who were doing it, they certainly weren't doing it because of the energy efficiency benefits and the quality benefits you can get with timber. It was speed. Speed of construction was the reason then. So I guess it's important that to ensure that that it's not just blanket endorsements. I presume you're taking that perspective as well. That there are right and wrong ways to build with wood, for instance.
If there was a perfect material, none of us would be here. But there isn't. But we have to understand the materials that we want to use, their strengths and their weaknesses. And we can't gloss those over because we prefer one or we only know one. If we're really serious about making better homes, better buildings, and having a lower impact, and watching our wallet, we'll become experts at understanding the interaction of these materials and how to design so that the human requirements of comfort and air quality are reflected in how we design and build.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Guido, Peter, Sukh, on that note, thank you so much for talking to us today, and enjoy the rest of your stay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
having us.